It's time to get real. Real situations and real solutions. It's time for Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing. Inspiring healthy communication, building strong connections, and helping you grow in love, one conversation at a time, right here on Pittsburgh's DSEN, each Monday from 8 to 10 p.m. Here's Dr. Linda Bing.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to Relationship Conversations. I'm Dr. Linda Bing, and I hope wherever you are safe and dry and warm. This current snowstorm is no joke, so hopefully there are no damages, no negative consequences, and you're just ready to settle in and have a good relationship conversation. My question for you tonight, at least in this first hour, is would you ever live apart from your spouse to advance your career? Today's topic is commuter marriages, staying together while you're living apart. Because according to the U.S. Census Bureau, about 3.5 million couples in the United States live separately for reasons other than impending divorce. This has nothing to do with a bad relationship or separation, a relationship that's about to end. These are married couples who, for other reasons, have to live apart from their spouse. So we're going to take a look at some of the pros and cons of that situation. But that's just the first hour of the show. In our second hour, we'll take a look at the new relationship blueprint, the new blueprint for marriage, because as you know, the way marriages look today is very different than the way marriages looked 30 or 40 years ago. Major differences. In fact, 30 or 40 years ago, you would not hear about as many couples living separately as you hear about today. So we want to take a look at some of the pros and cons of living separately, as well as the new blueprint. What are some other things that are not like your mother's marriage, okay? Of course, if you want to get in on the conversation, you can always call me at 412-213-8995. And if you don't want your voice on the air, you can send a text to 218-3888. So since I'm talking about commuter marriages, let me start out by just giving you what my definition is, okay? A commuter marriage is a relationship where spouses live apart due to work and travel to see each other periodically, often on weekends. This arrangement allows both partners to pursue careers that are geographically dispersed, and it's becoming more common due to factors like the rise of dual career couples and women's increasing participation in the workforce. People are looking for creative solutions. You know, people want to advance their careers, and you could have a situation where one spouse is doing very well in the current city. Maybe he or she is living their dream. You know, they've got the ideal job, they've got the corner office, they're making the kind of money they want to make, they're making the impact they want to make. But then something comes up for the other spouse. And now that spouse has an opportunity to have all of the same things, but in another city. What do you do in a situation like that? And especially if there are children involved, you want to work to make sure that you can provide the best possible of everything for your family. But sometimes that means that you can't always be present right there. So the number of couples living separately has more than doubled since 1990. That's up about 17% from about 2001, when 3 million couples were living separately. And the number stood at 2.7 million in the year 2000. What this means for the couples is spending more time on travel and housing. It's expensive to live apart because now you're maintaining two residences. There are two of everything. So whereas one residence you might be a homeowner and you're paying a mortgage, there's someplace else where you're paying rent. And if it's not rent, then maybe it's a hotel bill or something. If you're paying rent somewhere else, now you have to put food into both homes. You're covering electricity, internet, everything is double now. So to come out financially ahead is one of the reasons that people are doing this, but are they really coming out financially ahead? Because the current economy and the job market are making it such that people are really having to scramble to find good employment. I mean, just think about what's been going on in this country in the past year. You know, I don't know the exact number, but I know it's been reported that over 300,000 Black women lost their jobs in 2025. And we do know that people who were Certain government employees have lost jobs. We know that people who were part of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, have lost jobs. So now you have people who maybe had a great situation at home with a spouse now have to find a job wherever they can in order to make ends meet. So before we explore this new trend, let's look at some other trends that may be related to it. One of those trends concerns the salaries of women. According to a digital article in Family Studies, among women ages 25 to 39, higher incomes are associated with higher marriage rates. The relationship between income and relative marriage rates has remained relatively steady since 2009. Okay, so if we kind of break down what that's exactly talking about, they're saying that now women are making more money than we used to make in the past. And when women start making more money, many times they feel more comfortable getting into a marriage situation. They have their career on track, they're doing the things that they want to be doing, and they feel as if they're ready. They've got the career down pat, and now it's time to get on with their personal lives. Many times women forego marriage until they get secure in their careers. So now with women making more money, it's a different kind of a thing. So what might explain the connection between higher incomes and higher marriage rates among women? I just threw something out, but you might be able to think of other things that are causing these two things to intersect: higher incomes, higher marriage rates. One possibility is that college-educated women are more likely to both get married and to have higher personal incomes. One reason is they're starting to feel, as I said, economically safer. If the marriage ends, they'll still be financially okay. They don't have to worry about what they'll do without that spouse. And for many people, that's real. For a lot of women, they feel as if I can take care of myself by myself. But now, if I elevate my lifestyle because I'm joining with someone, should the marriage end for whatever reason, will I be able to maintain that lifestyle? And now that a lot of women are making more money, they're feeling like, yes, they can. Another reason is economic leverage. In many instances, as women start making more money, those same women are starting to feel more like they are their partner's equal. The days of June Cleaver are over with. Most women nowadays either are not choosing or don't have the choice to be able to stay at home and take care of kids. They have to get out and work in order to make ends meet and provide the kind of lifestyle for themselves and their families that they desire. So feeling like you are your partner's equal makes you feel a little bit better. You're not dependent on anyone to take care of you. You're contributing your own gifts and talents, skills, and abilities to the workplace. And then let's face it, weddings are expensive. Weddings are expensive. And so when a woman is below a certain age, and I don't know what that age happens to be. I would say perhaps in her 20s. When she's still in her 20s, many times her parents will cover the cost of the wedding, because traditionally, and I realize not everybody follows tradition, but traditionally in this country, it's the bride's parents who cover the wedding expenses. And then as a woman gets older, and let's face it, many times now women are waiting longer to get married. They're not necessarily getting married right out of college. They're not getting married in their 20s. And many times it's 30s and 40s when women are getting married for the very first time. Once you get to that level and you are self-sufficient, you're no longer living at home with mom and dad, you're paying your own bills. Many times mom and dad may help you out if you need them to cover the wedding. But a lot of times in that situation, you're on your own. So given that weddings are so expensive, many women are desiring to make more money before they actually look to tie the knot. So we're seeing that there are some reasons why higher salaries go along with higher marriage rates. Often to get to these higher paying jobs, women have to travel extensively. And I know for me, most of the jobs that I've had have required extensive travel throughout really my entire career. I've been a consultant, a trainer, a facilitator, and I have to go to where the client is. It's only since COVID that I don't have to travel as much. Pre-COVID, in order to train, you had to go to the client's location and meet with the client. Or if there was going to be a meeting, a marketing pitch, whatever it happened to be, we weren't doing it on the phone. We were not doing it on internet because we didn't have platforms like Microsoft Teams or Zoom. Those things were non-existent. So there was really no way other than to show up in person. So women are used to traveling extensively in more modern years and moving to new offices in a new location. Many times, in order to get that promotion, you have to pick up and go. And I know that I've done this in my career as well. I lived in one city. My husband at the time and my two children stayed behind in our home. But the reason I did it was a temporary assignment. I was only supposed to be gone for a few months. Those few months turned into 13 months. And then I was, or it might have been 15. But then I was like, okay, I need to come back home. So I was coming home on weekends, but still I was being a weekend wife and a weekend mom. And more women are faced with this situation. Either they are having to leave in order to maintain the level of employment they want, or they're being left behind while their husbands work somewhere else. One of my colleagues at a job that I had several years ago was like that. We were working in Tennessee. It's another time when I left to work somewhere else. We were working in Tennessee, and his wife was in North Carolina. So the same thing. He would be in Tennessee during the week, and he would go back to his home in North Carolina. And then, interestingly enough, their home base was Raleigh, but her company had her relocate to Charlotte. So he was in Chattanooga, she was in Charlotte, and they would meet at home on the weekends in Raleigh. There are all kinds of examples of this taking place all across the country. Women earn more than their husband in about 25% of marriages. And that's for women between the ages of 18 and 65. So it's a broad spectrum. It's not just any particular generation or any particular age group. More and more of that is happening as well. And actually, we could do a whole different show on the dynamics of women earning more than their husbands, because in many cases it's accepted and everybody is okay with it. But there are some instances where it doesn't go over very well. The two individuals think they can handle it, but the dynamic changes. And because the dynamic is changing, it causes changes in the relationship. But using data from 4,000 married couples who were surveyed as part of a US National Survey of Families and Households, the researchers show that the percentage of people who report being very happy with their marriage declines when a woman earns more money than her husband. So there's some real truth behind that stuff. So women can potentially feel overloaded with responsibility and can be made to feel as though they have to choose between their family and their career. Throughout most of history, men have not been faced with that, but women are often faced with having to make that choice. And men may potentially feel threatened by a female partner who earns more money, and he might even resent her position because, again, many times when she earns more, the dynamic changes. And if she's the one who leaves for a different career opportunity, some men feel resentful of the fact that they are left behind and that the bulk of the child rearing responsibility falls on them. But if you think about it, there are some occupations where people have worked in two separate cities all the time. Think about the military. You know, our military men and women go off to work in wherever they happen to be deployed. And it's not in all circumstances where the family gets to move with them, live on in the barracks or on the base and close to home. That doesn't always work out. So people in the military are used to this, and they may even feel like, what's the big deal? You know, that may be the entirety of their married life, is living in two separate places, and somehow they seem to make it work. It would be interesting, though, to talk to them in particular about what it's like, how it feels to be that spouse who's deployed, how it feels to be the spouse who is at home. And of course, they have other pressures because they think about things like the safety of the spouse who's deployed. But people in the military experience this. People who work for the airlines, you know, if someone is a pilot, a flight attendant, many times flight attendants are based in a city different than where they live. So for the 3 or 4 days that they are on call, they might be in that particular city. And of course, they're flying all over the place. But then when their tour ends, they fly back home to wherever home happens to be. And you've seen it. You've been on flights where you see a flight attendant or a pilot or someone in uniform sitting in the cabin along with the passengers. Chances are that individual is either flying to their home base or the city that they work out of to go to work, or they have finished their 3 or 4 day tour and they're now going back home to their family. Another one that comes to mind for me would be in the entertainment industry. It's not uncommon. Actors have to shoot on location. So if you're shooting a film and it takes months to get that done, if you're shooting a series, and many times now, like Netflix and others, they will shoot the entire like 8 episodes all at once. So it's not uncommon for people in the entertainment industry to also have to be living apart from their family members. So again, if you have some experience in this area, I'd love to hear from you. Or if you have some thoughts about it, how hard you think it might be, what are some of the challenges, the pros and cons, give us a call. Let's talk about it. And while you're doing that, I'm going to share with you some of the key characteristics of commuter marriages. So one is obviously living apart. That's what makes it a commuter marriage. Spouses maintain separate residences, often in different cities, different states, different countries. Another one is a key characteristic is that they are career driven. You have to be very career oriented to make that choice of I'm going to go, or even to make the choice of I'm going to stay. Because think about it, the partner who stays behind could pack up and go as well, but they probably are secure in their career. And so they don't want to leave their job behind either. So the separation is usually caused by one or both parties' jobs, as their career opportunities are not in the same location. Another key characteristic would be periodic reunions. We know that commuter marriages have, as a marker, for lack of a better term, periodic reunions, which means that the couples see each other regularly, but not daily. And typically they meet up on weekends or for extended periods. So maybe in this hybrid situation that we work in now, again, we talked about, I said how pre-COVID, I was always on the road, probably close to 2 weeks out of every month. But post-COVID, we're able to do so many things digitally. We can talk to people on platforms like Zoom or Teams or Google Meet and others. So because of that, people are often working in hybrid situations as well. So if you do have to travel or you do have to relocate by yourself to another city, you are often allowed to work in a hybrid situation. Maybe you only have to work 3 days out of the week. Let's say you work Tuesday through Thursday. Thursday night, you get on that plane, you fly home, and you don't go back until either Monday night or Tuesday morning, get off the plane, go straight to the office. Or maybe you're lucky enough that you are driving in driving distance, like the example I gave you of the couple that would meet up in Raleigh. She could drive back and forth between Charlotte and Raleigh. She didn't have to fly. So if something were going on in Raleigh that she needed to get back for, quite naturally, she could hop in the car, drive to Raleigh and do so. So they're periodic reunions. Some people are able to schedule them. They know that every weekend we're going to meet up and see one another. And that means you're scheduling other things too. You're scheduling intimacy, you're scheduling sex, you're scheduling when we can date, you're scheduling everything, because you're only going to be together for 2 or 3 days, maybe 4 at the most. And then there are some situations where the couple doesn't have a regular schedule like that. Like think about a traveling nurse, for example. Traveling nurses may not work the same schedule all the time. So they may not even be back home on the days when their spouse is at home. And if both parties are traveling, which was my situation for several years as well, you kind of meet up where you can. Sometimes you meet up in a totally different city, or you have to try to arrange your life so that we can at least cross paths for a day or two before one of us has to take off again. So those periodic reunions, sometimes they're predictable and you can schedule them for every weekend, and other times you just have to get in where you fit in. Dual career couples is usually what we're talking about. It's usually a dual career couple, because if one spouse, and I recognize that today it's not always the mom, she's not always the one who might be at home with the kids. There are a lot of stay-at-home dads as well. So that stay-at-home parent, if they don't have a career, or if they have a career that they're able to do digitally, then they're able to pick up and go with the spouse who needs to move and relocate for a job. But usually when they're living separately, you've got a dual career couple. Married partners who live apart for extended periods, often in different cities or countries due to separate career opportunities, military deployment, or a need for separation. Sometimes, yes, people separate for a break. They need some more me time. They need to find themselves, whatever the case might be. But for the most part, we're staying focused on people who are in good marital situations, but the circumstances just require them to spend some time apart. As I mentioned, sometimes it's professionals in fields like medicine, tech, academia, foreign service. Yeah, think about that. I talked about the military, but you might be a diplomat in another country. There are all kinds of foreign service jobs where you may have to leave. Many of the tech jobs require people to go to other countries. I know of someone who his company was involved in creating water treatment. That's what it was a water treatment company, excuse me. And one of the countries they were working in was India. So he would spend long periods of time. He wasn't gone, living in another country, but he would spend months away from his family while they were in India, taking care of the infrastructure necessary for these water treatment facilities. And then there's a growing trend due to dispersed jobs and evolving family norms. Some people really don't see what the big deal is. Some people really feel like as long as we can FaceTime or Skype or get together on Zoom, as long as we can touch base periodically, they're okay with segmenting. I'm married, but I have to live apart. And while challenging, these relationships can thrive with intentional communication, leveraging technology for connection, and prioritizing quality time when together. So there are things you can do, but those things I just mentioned are some of the characteristics that go along with a computer marriage. So if you just tuned in, this is Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing, and tonight we're talking about commuter marriages. We're talking about situations where, due to careers, people live in separate cities, sometimes separate states, separate countries, in order to both be able to maximize their potential for their careers, take advantage of career opportunities. And if you've ever been in a commuter marriage, let me know. Or if you think you could, think you couldn't. There's some people who, for reasons, sometimes religious affiliations, feel like, no, there's no way that I would allow that into my marriage. So let me know what your thoughts are. And in the meantime, I have, I believe, a text coming in. All right, Diva is on the line from Pittsburgh. Hey, Diva, you're one of my faithfuls. I love talking to you. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you, my friend. So what's on your mind? How do you feel about commuter marriages?
You know what? I think you have to be a strong man and woman to be able to survive a commuter marriage. I personally wouldn't want to have it. I know during my career, I traveled when our kids were younger. And thank goodness I have a very, very good husband. So he worked with me when I would have to go out of town. So he was really, really good. But I'm glad it was only for a season because I just felt like, I missed my husband, I missed my kids. I also didn't want to put too much on him. And plus, I wanted to be present. So I know people have to do it, the communal marriage, you have to do what you have to do. But I guess my comment is I'm glad that I didn't have to do it for any length of time. Mine was traveling throughout the year, but not long periods of time and not constantly. So, I had a business trip. At some point, it did feel like it was a lot, but it was for a period of time. But I just say, hats off to those people who can do it. But I like being able to come home to my husband, to my kids, and, being with them like 24/7. So, I think you have to be really, really strong people to be able to, have a marriage survive like that. But I'm not at all putting people down for it or anything. I'm just making a comment that they're really, really strong and, they could do it. I'm just glad I didn't have to do it.
What was the hardest thing for you, Diva? What do you think was the hardest thing?
The hardest thing was being away from my family because our kids were little. Even when I was in graduate school, I went away to Europe for almost 2 weeks. And we had an infant. We had a 5-year-old and we had a baby under a year old. And my husband was a trooper. He took care of the kids, while I was gone. So the hardest thing was me being away from my family. I knew that my husband could do it, but it was almost like I wanted to do it. I wanted to be there. I always wanted to be present in my kids' life and my husband's life. And I always wanted to do my part, I think is a big thing too. I didn't want everything to be on him. I wanted to make sure that I did my part, as well as if there was something going on, and this might sound funny, but just say they had to go to the doctor. I prefer to be there because my husband always say, well, wow, you're interrogating me. Or, he might not have asked the doctor the questions I would have. So now I'm frustrated because I don't have all the answers that I would have liked, So, and then even when we had sporting events, we did the divide and conquer, type of thing. So, yeah, I think the hardest thing is just being away from your family, from your husband, from your kids. That was hard for me.
I would agree.
Yeah, so,
My stretch was leaving Alpharetta, which is Metro Atlanta, leaving Alpharetta and going to Birmingham. It was just a 2-hour drive, but it was too much to go back and forth every day. My kids were young as well. They were 2 and 6. And so leaving them, you feel like you're missing out on a lot of things that they get involved in, especially with that 2-year-old. He was changing a lot from day to day. And when you come back on the weekend, at least for me, there was a change in the dynamics because the 2-year-old got accustomed to when he would call for mommy, daddy is the one who would show up. So after a while, you could see that he and daddy were getting a lot closer, and you kind of feel it pulls at your heart. It's like, I'm mommy, I want you to be close to me. And it's not that he wasn't, but it was like, well, what do you expect? So I say I didn't have a choice only because it was a requirement of the job. Of course, you always have a choice, but the choice would have been if I said no, I probably would have been out of a job. I thought it was just temporary, and it was, but 15 months is a long temporary. So it was that feeling of this is something I have to do. And when I left, they didn't say how long it was going to be, just that it was temporary. And so, yeah, I'm with you on that one. You miss the family, and you do have to be strong because one of the things that not all couples would think about, but some would have to think about, is there going to be any infidelity while I'm gone? Will that person miss me so much? Or if you're the one who's leaving, am I going to be tempted? So again, you've got that pull. I believe that it's always best, if possible, for both parents to stay together or for husband and wife to stay together in the marriage, but sometimes there's circumstances where that just doesn't happen. And it can increase the tension in the marriage. There can be some resentment. People might be dissatisfied because there's a lack of sexual intimacy on a regular and frequent basis. You're going to miss out on some important moments. So yeah, there's some pros and some cons to it. But thanks, Diva. Appreciate you calling in with your comment. So here's some of
absolutely.
the
Thank
pros.
you.
Sure, thank you. I'll share some pros and cons, where time moves quickly. We're coming up on that first break, but some of the pros, and these come from just a few of them, but they come from Rutgers University. Some of the experts at Rutgers would say that one of the good things is that it can offer a fresh perspective. So from a career standpoint, yes, but even from a marriage standpoint, you may learn to appreciate some of the things that used to get under your skin when you were there all the time. You might appreciate the fact that you do have someone who loves you enough to hold things down and let you go and explore. You might look at marriage differently, family differently, parenting differently. So yeah, you might go to a different country and now you've got a different cultural experience, which might make you appreciate our culture even more. So you can get a fresh perspective. They also say there's a reduced daily demand. If you are the parent who left and you don't have children with you, then yeah, I can see that. Maybe you don't have to do the drop-offs and the pickups, and you don't have to make the lunches and read the bedtime stories and get them ready for bath. And so many times what the traveling parent will do is work longer and harder because they don't want to go home to an empty apartment that doesn't even feel like home. So on one hand, yes, it may lighten up the daily demand, but it can also increase the loneliness. You have more personal time. That's a pro. If you're not spending all of your non-working hours working, then yeah, you might be able to catch a movie, go to a museum, go out to different restaurants, make new friends, join an organization, things along those lines. And it does allow you to focus more on your career and really dig in and try to make a difference. Now, some of the cons is that it requires strong communication. You have to stay in constant communication with that partner. And much as like what Diva was saying, make sure that if there's a doctor appointment, these are all the questions I need you to ask and get answers for me. And, come back and tell me what happened. Don't make me interrogate you. Give me that information freely. Or just staying on top of schedules and what's going on, what's changing with the children that you need to be aware of. Another con I already mentioned, I said it can lead to loneliness or even resentment if it's not managed well. And then it does complicate the family logistics because if there are children, then one parent is going to have to do the work of two. So there are some things that could possibly get in the way. And again, right before we break, let me just share with you that studies show that togetherness and romance can lead to a bunch of things. They lead to happier marriages, and people who are happily married tend to be physically and mentally healthier. They tend to be wealthier. They tend to be less subjected to crime and violence. They are more active in their communities. They're overall happier, and their kids enjoy better outcomes in virtually every way. So just some of the pros and cons. There may be many more. And if you can think of some others, we'd love to hear them. So right now we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about the children in more detail, because I want to shift the conversation just a little bit. Yes, you have one set of parameters when it's just two adults, but when children are involved, it's a little bit different. So while we're gone, think about what do you think it takes to make a commuter marriage work? And when we come back to Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing, you can share your thoughts with me. Be right back.
Pittsburgh, it's an old school party. Yes, each Saturday we throw it back with some of the best old school music, funk, R&B, old school, rap, hip hop, and all the jams that make you move and dance. Yes, check it out. Each Saturday, right here on Pittsburgh's DSEN, all the old school jams, 6 to 11 p.m.
Pittsburgh, have you seen our Sunday radio schedule? Ooh, it is lit. Start the day off with our Sunday gospel music from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. It will inspire you and have you praising the Lord. Then from 3 to 8 p.m., we bring you Sunday jazz melody for all the jazz lovers. Then cap off the night with The Quiet Storm from 8 to 11 p.m. to hear the best smooth, romantic, and soulful R&B sounds of yesterday and today. All that each Sunday on Pittsburgh's DSEN, the place for soul.
Looking for a cost-effective way to help increase your company's bottom line? Look no further than Soul Pit Media. With our award-winning print, internet, podcast, and Soul Pit television options, we can help your business get to that next level. For more information, contact Craig Dawson at 412-407-7685. That's 412-407-7685. And let Soul Pit Media take you to that next level.
Business owners thinking about back-to-school promotions and replacing summer flavors with pumpkin? What about your taxes? Reduce your stress and tax liabilities by planning for tax time now with Cameron Professional Services Group. CPSG takes your goals, values, and visions to create a custom tax plan catered specifically to your business. We work closely with you to ensure that as your business grows and goals shift, so will your custom plan. Located in the Hill District in Pittsburgh, PA, CPSG is a CPA and consultant firm, providing services in accounting, auditing, tax planning and preparation, community development, and operational management. Call Cameron Professional Services Group today at 412-251-0607.
Have you had the Beat by Niche experience? Beat by Niche is one of the top makeup artists in the city of Pittsburgh. She's touched the face of Cardi B, Love and Hip Hop personalities, and various Steeler wives. If you have not sat in her chair, what are you waiting for? Visit beatbyniche.com to schedule your special makeover for all occasions: weddings, graduations, proms, photo ops, and more. Visit beatbyniche.com and experience the touch of excellence.
Welcome back to Relationship Conversations on Pittsburgh's DSEN. I'm Dr. Linda Bing, and I want to know, what do you think it takes to make a commuter marriage work? That's the topic for this hour. We're talking about commuter marriages. And remember, a commuter marriage is one where the spouses live separately for career reasons, and they have to travel back and forth periodically to visit one another. So it takes a lot of intentionality. And when children are involved, you have to be even more intentional. What are the things that you need to do to make sure that the children feel safe and secure? How do you maintain contact with the children? How do you keep quality visits going with the children? There are a number of different things that you have to consider. So let's talk a little bit about key considerations for children and parents. One is the super parent dynamic. That's when one parent often shoulders all the daily responsibilities like school and chores and emotional support, recreational activities, the whole nine. They act as a super parent. It's like being a single parent all week long. This can lead to making them feel exhausted. It can lead to crucial mistakes happening in the parenting because you don't have backup and you can't think of everything all of the time. So when that's the case, it's critical that you have some form of support system in place. Maybe there are other family members who can help out. Maybe there are neighbors or church members who can help out. But one key consideration is to avoid the super parent dynamic. Another key consideration is to have structured connection. That means when the commuting spouse returns, planning is key. How are we going to make the most out of these 2 or 3 days that you're back with us? And it includes some one-on-one time, or at least it should, some one-on-one time with each child. Each kid needs to know that he or she is special and that they have your full and undivided attention because they've been missing you for so long. So it doesn't mean that you forego family things, but you have to plan on what are some things that the entire family does together. What are some things that maybe I just do with the kids? And what is something that I can do with each one of them individually? Doesn't have to be major. Maybe you take somebody for ice cream. Maybe you read a story to someone else. Maybe you play video games with someone else. Whatever the case might be, just make sure that each child gets their own dedicated time. And of course, there needs to be just simple mommy and daddy time. I don't know if I mentioned that one before. I talked about family when the whole family's together, but there needs to be some mommy and daddy as well. So there's a lot that you have to plan, and consistency is crucial. That's another key consideration. Parents have to present a unified front to prevent children from exploiting inconsistencies. You don't want them to try to play one parent against the other. You don't want them to try to skate around the rules because they're two different environments. You don't want them to think or tell the parent who's been traveling when that parent comes back, well, when you're not here, mommy lets me do this or daddy lets me do that. Have to be consistent, and the rules should not change just because one of the two parents is no longer in the household every single day. And that parent has to still be allowed to have the same impact. I may not be here every day, but I am still your dad, or I am still your mom, and the same rules apply. You will have to listen to me. Yes, I know that all week you've been taking direction and instruction from mom or dad, but now I'm back in the house. I'm still your parent, and you have to listen to me as well. Another key consideration is making sure that there is some emotional stability. Some children are going to experience anxiety around the parent that's leaving. It feels like a separation for them. And depending on the age of the child, they don't necessarily have a good grasp on time and time frames. So they don't necessarily understand what a week is or when the parent is coming back, but they need to know that that parent will return. But there may be some anxiety, there may be some grief. It feels like a loss. And so not all children deal well with separation. Some do have separation anxiety. It's going to be critical that you talk about the absent parent all the time. Include the absent parent in specific conversations. Call, if the child is missing the parent, call. Try to do as many FaceTime calls as possible so that they can still see that parent. Try to keep up some of the rituals. If both parents usually tuck the children in at night, then get one of them on the phone, the parent that's traveling, get them on the phone as much as possible to participate in those nighttime rituals. If they're not there for bath time, set the phone up with FaceTime and the parent can still talk while you bathe the child. All of these things can still happen. Granted, it's going to be different. It's not going to be the same as being there, but it's important that you keep those consistencies so that you keep emotional stability for the children. And then you have to think about quality versus quantity. So when you are physically there, be present. You cannot have split attention. You cannot be with the child and be multitasking. It's bad enough from their perspective that you're not here all the time. So when you are here, I need you to be present. And so for that commuting parent, this means that you have to make the time count rather than just being in the same house or in the same room. To the extent possible, do activities that involve interaction, playing games together, doing some crafting object together, going outside and playing sports together. Do something other than sit and watch TV or a movie, because again, you're not interacting and they're not getting the benefit of who you are and what you bring to the family. So those are just some things that you need to take into consideration, because remember, we're focused as the adults, we're focused on maybe the money. We're focused on career responsibilities. We're focused on the logistics of traveling back and forth. We're focused on the logistics of maintaining the household without the other parent being there. And many times it's easy to lose focus about the most important part of the family. One of the main reasons why you're doing this for the betterment of the children. So make sure that you have focus on the children. So just kind of recap that. You're going to, make sure that there's some sort of schedule around visits so the kids know when to expect you. Prioritize the couple, but also spend time as a family just with the kids and with each child one-on-one. Make sure that you use technology or whatever you have to have a virtual presence in the home. And then try to plan the end date. Like I said, in my situation, when I had to do it, if I look back, one of the things that I would have tried to push harder on is how long. I did ask, and the response was vague. It was sort of like, there was something to get accomplished, and when it's accomplished, okay, fine, you can come back. But there was always more and more and more. So make sure before you leave, you push to get an end date so that you can prepare yourself and prepare the family for when you'll be coming back home and be reintegrated into the family. In order for you to survive, there are some things that are required. going to go through a list of what some of these things are. And again, if you have a comment or a question, if you want to add to the list, if you find that you did this and there's something that doesn't sit quite right in what we're talking about, then give me a call. Or if you have an experience to share, maybe this is something that you've done, or maybe it's something you would never consider doing. Everyone can benefit from the thoughts and opinions of other people. So you're either going to call me at 412-213-8995 or 412-218-3888 is the number to text. All right, so here's some things that are required for survival. One is constant quality communication. So by constant, make the calls short, short calls, short texts, short video chats, so that you can share small details of your day to keep feeling like you're a part of the day and they're a part of your day. Many times we get so busy that we just do that maybe one late night call at night. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you can, send a text during the day just to let your spouse know that you're thinking about them. And if your children are old enough that they have their own phones, you want to text them too. Text them, call them, video chat. Try to maintain some constant quality communication. Use technology creatively. So you're going to use webcams and digital photos, use different apps and messaging. Anything that technology will allow you to do to stay in touch, do that. Maybe there's some game that you play together. I don't play the games that come on the phone, but I know a big one was like Candy Crush. I don't know if people still play that or not, but I know it was one of those games where you were able to play against other people. Do something like that just so that you keep the interaction going. You want to have shared goals. So work towards a shared vision of when you're going to do different things together, whether it's something around the house, something around the home city, maybe it's planning a vacation, whatever it might be. You're going to plan visits. That's another one. Schedule regular visits. If you can come home every weekend, do it. One of the things you might want to do is have the family come to you. I know when I was in Birmingham, the person that I was reporting to in Birmingham, he became a mentor and a friend and still is dear to me today, many, many years later. I told you I've been in my own business for 25 years. So we're going back more than 25 years ago, but I will never forget Robert Holmes. And one of the things that he did was they set me up in a corporate apartment that was furnished, but he got a 2-bedroom apartment because he said sometimes it will be good for your family to come here and see you and where you operate and where you sleep and where you go to eat and the things that you're doing, so that even though you're not with them, when you're talking to them, they can visualize, they can imagine. I thought that was so brilliant, but it was also kind and caring, because quite naturally it was costing the company more for a 2-bedroom furnished apartment than a 1-bedroom. But he understood the importance of family and he made that a priority. So if you can, let your family come see you sometimes. Now, granted, if it's a flight, maybe that can be a little cost prohibitive depending on where you are. If you're out of state, out of the country, whatever, it may not work, but you never know. Maybe if you're someplace tropical or something that's vacation oriented, maybe on a school break, they come over to you and they get a little bit of vacation and they spend time with you instead of you going to them. So be as creative as you can, but you need to plan the visits, schedule them regularly. If you're not going to be home every weekend, then is it going to be monthly, quarterly, whatever the case might be. And you want to create some anticipation by planning the fun. What are we going to do together? Even the mundane activities, we're going to, redecorate your room or whatever it might be that might give them something to look forward to. Maintain independence with a strong sense of self. So you want to cultivate your own life. Now, granted, you're not going to become so independent that you separate from the family, but in order to stay physically and emotionally healthy, you need to have a life. So don't just work and go back to your apartment at the end of the day, eat, watch TV, and go to bed. Try to get involved in some things. Join a club or a committee. Make some friends, someone that you can grab a bite to eat with or a cup of coffee. Pick up a hobby. If bowling was something you like to do, find out where you can bowl. Maybe the company has a bowling team. Look for things to do. Of course, as you're looking for things to do, this should go without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. Try to maintain same-sex relationships. Do not allow yourself to get close to someone of the opposite sex. And of course, I'm referring to heterosexual relationships here, but don't put yourself in a position where temptation might flare up. Regardless of how strong you are or how strong you think you are, you don't want to put yourself into a bad situation. You don't want to create something that even looks bad by hanging out. Could be a totally platonic situation, but you don't want people seeing it and talking about it, even if temptation is not what you're concerned about. So try to find people who that's not going to be an issue. And let's see, we want to outsource chores to reduce stress. Now, that's something that can help. There are times when one or the other parent is traveling, and maybe you want to get a nanny to kind of help take some of the childcare responsibilities off. Or maybe you have someone come in and clean periodically. Doesn't have to be on a regular basis, but maybe once a month, do some of the deeper cleaning so that when whoever does the cleaning, I'm not going to assume that it's the woman in the house, but whoever does the cleaning, if they are the parent that's traveling, when they come back home, that spouse doesn't want to spend their time cleaning, and the one who's remaining home does not want to add cleaning to the responsibilities as well, because they already have more responsibilities on them than they would normally have. So you might have to outsource some things. Be a partner, not a detective. Focus on supporting one another rather than questioning every move. So what? They normally call you at 8:30 every night, and now it's 8:30 and 8:45 and 9 o'clock, and the phone still didn't ring. Allow them some grace. Maybe they're out enjoying themselves. When they come back, don't interrogate them. Let them have a life. And so you want to be a partner. You want to be supportive of them doing what they do. Even the parent that stays at home, maybe that particular spouse has a family member come over and babysit so they can get out of the house. They need some adult companionship as well. They need to do things with friends, things that they would have been able to do if you were at home. Now maybe they can't. So if they get a babysitter and you call and there's a sitter with the kids, don't be upset and don't interrogate them. Just be a supportive partner. Prioritize intimacy. It's okay to talk about things like loneliness. Find ways to maintain the closeness. Let them know what you're feeling. If you're feeling anxious, if there's depression setting in, if you're lonely, whatever it is, that your spouse is the best one to talk to. That's how people get into trouble, because somebody else on the job will have, a listening ear, and you try talking to them about what you're going through. And not everybody has the best of intentions. Sometimes people will use that information to flip things so that now they can step into the gap, and you don't want that to happen. But you want to focus on maintaining and building the intimacy that you and your spouse have by continuing to talk about the full range of emotions that you might be feeling. So I've got two more tips for you, and then we're going to take a break. And again, I want to hear what's going on. I want to hear if you have been in this situation, because after this break, we're going to shift gears. It doesn't mean that you can't continue to call in about commuter marriages, but we are going to shift gears. So first, let me give you these last two tips. One is to build trust. Do things that will help build the trust. You need to be transparent. You need to avoid jealousy and just maintain trust. If there's a lack of trust in the relationship to begin with, then a commuter marriage is not a good thing for your family to do. It's not worth the extra money, because you're going to impact the foundation of the marriage. You want to make sure that you've got a good, trusting marriage to begin with, and then do things to maintain that trust. And then the last one before we break, approaching challenges as a team to build trust and to keep intimacy alive. So that means that you have to view yourselves as working together, regardless of the distance. You're going to work together, not against each other, whether it has to do with the house, paying the bills, the children's behavior, whatever the case might be. Because let's face it, kids may act out at this point. They don't know how to express in a constructive way everything that they're feeling around this separation. So they may have some behavioral challenges, but come together and approach them as a team. And then the at-home partner should update the one who's traveling on problems that arise, how the problem was solved, what emotional support they might need. All of those things are so important. So if you are in a commuter marriage, an important question to ask yourself is the distance strengthening your marriage or protecting you from something you don't want to face? I'm going to say that one again. Is the distance strengthening your marriage or protecting you from something you don't want to face? Don't let the distance be your way of escaping. If there's something that needs to be dealt with in the marriage, in the family, in the household, don't let the distance, the commuter marriage, be your vehicle for escape, because if it's weak already, it's only going to get weaker. So really need to ask yourself, if I'm willing to do this, what is it? And is it going to help the marriage because I am concentrating on the pros, I'm bringing back more money, more experience, those kinds of things, or is it going to weaken the marriage? So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the new blueprint for marriage. All right, so come on back to Relationship Conversations. I'm Dr. Linda Bing, and you're listening to Pittsburgh's DSEN.
Looking for a cost-effective way to help increase your company's bottom line? Look no further than Soul Pit Media. With our award-winning print, internet, podcast, and Soul Pit television options, we can help your business get to that next level. For more information, contact Craig Dawson at 412-407-7685. That's 412-407-7685. And let Soul Pit Media take you to that next level.
Business owners thinking about back-to-school promotions and replacing summer flavors with pumpkin? What about your taxes? Reduce your stress and tax liabilities by planning for tax time now with Cameron Professional Services Group. CPSG takes your goals, values, and visions to create a custom tax plan catered specifically to your business. We work closely with you to ensure that as your business grows and goals shift, so will your custom plan. Located in the Hill District in Pittsburgh, PA, CPSG is a CPA and consultant firm, providing services in accounting, auditing, tax planning and preparation, community development, and operational management. Call Cameron Professional Services Group today at 412-251-0607.
Have you had the Beat by Niche experience? Beat by Niche is one of the top makeup artists in the city of Pittsburgh. She's touched the face of Cardi B, love and hip-hop personalities, and various Steeler wives. If you have not sat in her chair, what are you waiting for? Visit beatbyniche.com to schedule your special makeover for all occasions: weddings, graduations, proms, photo ops, and more. Visit beatbyniche.com and experience the touch of excellence.
Thanks for listening to Pittsburgh's DSEN. I'm Kevin Cameron of Soul Take, the sports talk show that airs each Tuesday from 6 to 8 p.m. As we continue to celebrate Black History Month, we present a number of Black sports athletes. This segment's athlete is Wilma Rudolph.
It wasn't an easy road for Wilma Rudolph, having to overcome polio and scarlet fever, which left her with a twisted left leg. As a child, Rudolph was told she would never walk again, but she never stopped working at getting stronger and faster. Remarkably, at the age of 16, the Tennessee native won bronze on the 4x100 relay team while still in high school. 4 years later, at the 1960 Games in Rome, Rudolph had her true breakthrough, setting a world record and winning gold in the 100-meter sprint, 200 meters, and the 4x100-meter relay. Her performance earned her the title, the fastest woman in the world. Rudolph returned home a hero. She insisted her homecoming parade and banquet be open to all residents, the first racially integrated events in Clarksville, Tennessee. Rudolph never competed in the Olympics again. She retired, later became a teacher and a commentator. Rudolph died in 1994, a civil rights and women's rights pioneer.
And that was Wilma Rudolph, our Black History Month athlete.
Chair is still a chair.
Welcome
Even
back.
when there's no one.
I love that song. Welcome back. I'm Dr. Linda Bing, and this is Relationship Conversations. We've been talking about commuter marriages. We've been talking about the type of marriage where spouses don't live together because they want to keep their career or their dream alive. Now, even though I've been talking about married couples, I want to make sure that I let you know this also applies to couples that are cohabitating. You don't have to be legally married in order for these same principles to apply. And I've also been speaking from a heterosexual perspective, and my examples are largely heterosexual. But again, no shade. It doesn't mean that these things won't work in a non-heterosexual union as well. So let's just keep that in mind. Part of the reason I'm saying that is because as we shift gears now, we've been talking about physical distance. But what happens when we're talking about distance that's not measured in miles, but it's measured in the way we understand and interpret what it means to say, I do. So even though I'm going to be talking about a new blueprint for marriage, if you're not in a marital situation, maybe you're single, pull out the nuggets that you can for future use. Or maybe you're cohabitating with someone, pull out the nuggets that you can use right now, because even though I'm speaking in terms of marriage, the principles still apply, okay? So now in the past, when we're talking about back when mama and them and grandmama and them, when everybody was married decades ago, marriage was pretty much this rigid template. You knew the roles, you knew the script, you stayed in your lane until the very end. But look around. If you look around, that template does not exist anymore. It's shattering. It is falling apart. We're moving into an era of sort of like custom built partnerships. You know, today's marriages don't look like the marriages of years ago. Years ago, no one would even consider, well, first of all, people didn't really go far from home. They didn't leave where they grew up. You know, you might find people within a 10-mile radius of where they were born. And certainly you didn't have one spouse leaving the other spouse to take care of all the responsibilities, including children. It just didn't work that way. But now, as we are, some would say, evolving, we're getting into these custom built partnerships. And we aren't just looking for a co-provider like perhaps 50 years ago. We're looking for, in many instances, people want to find someone who is their soulmate, their therapist, their life coach. I mean, we lean on spouses and partners quite a bit. We look for all of those things wrapped up into one. And sometimes some good quality people get counted out because they don't wear all of those hats well for you. So is it a beautiful evolution, or are we crushed by the weight of these new expectations? We're putting a lot on people. So in this hour, we're going to take a look at the new marriage blueprint. We'll talk about relationship contracts. That's a real thing, where couples are literally writing out what almost amounts to job descriptions. I'm not just talking about prenups. When I say a relationship contract, in fact, I'm not talking about prenuptial agreements. It is technically a prenuptial agreement if it was written before the nuptials, before you got married. But I'm not talking about the finances and who gets what if we split. I'm talking about relationship contracts that people are entering into that define who does what, when, where, why, and how. So we'll talk about that a little bit. We're also going to dive into something that's being called sleep divorce and why the secret to a happy marriage might actually be separate bedrooms. That's goes with the sleep divorce. We'll talk about that. And then finally, we'll ask a tough question. We're going to talk about if a marriage lasts, say, 10 years, and it helps both people grow, but ultimately it ends, is that really a failure? So it's about shifting the goal from longevity to quality. These are some of the conversations that people are having now. So even if these things have not been top of mind for you, you need to understand that they may become top of mind for your potential partner if you're not married. Or just because it's not top of mind for you, how do you know that these aren't things that your spouse is hearing about or thinking about? So stick with me for the next 60 minutes as we map out the future of how we love right here on Relationship Conversations, okay? So we're looking at the new blueprint. Now, if commuter marriages were about where we live, then this modern partnership is about how we live. How do we interpret what it really means when we say, I do? Marriages are moving us from what used to be a social and economical safety net to vehicles for growth. Again, 50, 60 years ago, even going back further than that, many times the roles were different. Women got married to be provided for. They got married to have children and reproduce, generate a family, to nurture the children that were produced in the marriage. But those roles have been changing and they're continuing to change. So there's something that we can talk about with respect to the all or nothing marriage, and according to now, there's a psychologist by the name of Eli Finkel. Eli Finkel wrote something called the suffocation model of marriage. I'm just the messenger, okay? The suffocation model of marriage was developed by psychologist Eli Finkel, and it says that the purpose of marriage in Western civilization has moved through three distinct eras. And we're going to talk about each one of those eras because they are the things that are moving us from having this social economic safety net to being vehicles of growth for ourselves and for our mate. So when we think about the things that Finkel came up with, the first era was the institutional era. And this goes way back. This is before 1850. And according to Finkel, this was all about survival and safety. Focus of this era was on meeting the physiological and safety needs of the individual. So if you remember, like Maslow's pyramid, did you learn about that? Everybody took Psych 101. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. At the very bottom level, a basic fundamental need of everyone is safety. Back in the day, the focus of marriage was, as I said, it was that male's role to provide safety for the wife and the family. It was physical safety in terms of being a protector. It was physiological safety in terms of being a provider. So being the one that made sure she had food and clothing and shelter. And then there was also an element of emotional safety in there, making sure that emotional needs were met. That was the focus. And the spouses were partners. They were economic partners in that he went out and made money to provide, and it was her role to, in many ways, determine how the money would be spent. So he brought the check in, she determined what would get spent on food and clothing and those kinds of things. So they were economic partners in marriages back in the institutional era. The psychology behind all of that was that love was a luxury, not a requirement. You were fortunate, you were blessed if you were able to get into a marriage and have love. I mean, think about it. Many marriages back in the day were predetermined, and there's some that still exist that way. It was one where they're prearranged. The parents decided based on economics and status and class and other things who was going to marry whom. It was not about who fell in love. Love, if you were lucky, came after. Like I said, it was a luxury. Maybe you got with someone and the two of you learned how to love one another. But back in the institutional era, pre 1850, love was a luxury, not a requirement. And success of a marriage was measured by how well the family unit survived and maintained their property. It didn't matter about, love and contentment and those kinds of things. Success was, are you able to figure this thing out so that you can survive? So that was the institutional era. Now, the second era that Finkel talked about was the companionate era. This was from 1850 until around 1965. And that's where the emphasis was really on love and belonging. So the focus was meeting the emotional needs. And that's sort of in the middle of Maslow's hierarchy. We got past the safety. That's there. You're being protected and provided for. Now we need you to feel love and feel a sense of belonging. So the marriage was, as industrialization met survival needs, couples began marrying for romance and companionship. It was no longer a big push on these prearranged marriages. Now you could seek out and fall in love before you got married. Romance was the big thing in this era. And the psychology behind it is that the goal shifted to finding the one, who was your soulmate, if such a thing exists. I personally don't think it does, but finding the one who makes you happy. That was the goal of it. People were finding themselves, and then they were finding the one who was going to make them happy. And success was measured by mutual affection. How well I take care of you and you take care of me. And do we have a harmonious domestic life? Is everybody getting along? Are we singing and there are flowers and roses and music? And, how are we getting along? Do we both feel loved and do we feel a sense of belonging? That was the big focus of that second era. The third era that Finkel talked about goes from 1965 to present day. And that era was called the self-expressive era. It's all about self-actualization. And basically, that's just a fancy way of saying to develop into your full potential, to continually grow and develop as a human being. When you are self-actualized, you've reached it, whatever it happens to be for you. You are fully developed in terms of your potential. So the focus in the era that we are supposedly living in now is meeting the esteem and the growth needs. That's the top of the pyramid. The last part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs is self-actualization. And so at this time, the focus, like I said, is on feeling like somebody, living out your potential. And that's why we're seeing commuter marriages, for instance, because in order to live out your potential, you have the need to go and accept this particular opportunity. You have the need to go and fulfill your dream. Maybe that's your dream job. You went to school hoping and praying that this would materialize in your life. Here it is. So now, are you going to stay at home with family? Or are you going to go and allow yourself to, in your mind, become fully self-actualized? The marriage is now a vehicle for personal growth. It's no longer the social and economic safety net. It's now a vehicle for personal growth. It's almost as if we've gone from focusing on the unit to now focusing on self. Self has become the most important thing. Partners expect each other to be best friends who help them discover their authentic selves and reach their full potential. Many times you hear people talk about their partner being their best friend. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's very different than the way it used to be when you married the person that your parents told you to marry, whether you love them or not. Now we want to make sure that this is someone that I love, who loves me. This is my best friend. We do things together. We enjoy each other's company. It's totally different. And the psychology behind it is that it creates this all or nothing state. So while the best modern marriages are more fulfilling than marriages were back in the day, the high expectation can suffocate a relationship if the couple doesn't invest enough time and psychological energy to meet them. And that's why he talks about the suffocation model of marriage, because he's saying that we have become individuals. Whether you believe we've evolved to this or gone backwards, it's entirely up to you. But the theory says that we have evolved to a place where we want that other person to be our all in all. We don't want the nothing, we want the all. And when you expect your partner to be your all in all, you suffocate them. It's a lot of weight to carry. It puts too much pressure on. When they don't measure up, you're disappointed, and so are they. It's too much. So here's an example. I'll read you a scenario. So a husband works a stable job. He's a great father. He never misses a mortgage payment. He plays with the kids. He dates the mom. Even, they're married, but they're still going on dates. He's the great provider. He's present in the home, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. He's there. However, his wife feels unfulfilled because they don't have deep intellectual conversations or shared hobbies that challenge them. So this is a situation, and it happens all the time. This is a situation where this person in your mind, the husband in this case, is not fulfilling all of those boxes I talked about. You're not my best friend, my therapist, my life coach, my life partner. You're not doing it all for me. And so the conflict comes in where, in 1950, her complaints would be seen as ungrateful. If she was complaining about those things, people would say, you are ungrateful. He's a great provider. All of your physiological needs are being met, because remember, back then, that's what's the purpose. But the safety needs were met, but the other needs were not. And so today, as opposed to in the 50s, she feels that she's suffocating because her need for self-actualization isn't being met. She feels like she's being restricted. She's being held down. She can't live up to her full potential because she's not getting everything that she thinks she needs. And it may not all be needs. Some of it may be desires. That's a debate. But the real question is it fair to sort of fire a partner who's doing a great job at the basics, but you're firing them because they aren't your spiritual match? That soulmate concept is one that really can mess a lot of people up, because some people really do believe that there is that one person out there who fulfills all of my needs, and that's a myth. It's a myth. You might come close. You'll find somebody who can get most of them. Maybe they can hit the important ones, but not the less important ones. But it's a lot, and it's not fair to fire somebody who's doing a good job, but not, in your opinion, your spiritual match. Here's another example. In this scenario, one partner gets a massive promotion that requires moving to a city where the other partner has no network and can't pursue their specific passion. So I talked about this earlier. You have one partner who is thriving right where they are. You have another partner who's doing okay, but not necessarily thriving. They're surviving. But now an opportunity has come up where they can go someplace else and thrive. Now, if the spouse follows, the spouse is giving up thriving for merely surviving. In some instances, as a family, you might have to decide, okay, you had your turn, now it's my turn. Or you may have to look at who's bringing in the most money, and that's where we live. But there are decisions to be made about whether or not we are going to work in separate cities or not. And there are some people, I said I went for a temporary assignment that ended up being twice as long as I thought it was going to be. It was 15 months. But there are some people who spend years living in separate situations. And some of them say it works, for others it doesn't. But the conflict is that traditionally, the family unit moved and they moved for the highest income earner. So that was economic safety. And now the partner being asked to move may refuse because it hinders their individual identity and growth. So again, we've traded in this new blueprint, and I'm not passing judgment on the blueprint. I'm just sharing it. I'm just talking about the trends, the way that marriage is going. We have gone from seeking social and economic safety to looking at living out our full potential. And I guess in some instances, people feel as if they can't do both, so they have to decide. So we used to prioritize the unit. Now we prioritize the individual within the unit. And at what point does supporting your partner turn into losing yourself? You know, if you're following your partner in his or her dream, are you losing yourself? So that's a question. And I'd love to know what you think about it. You know, are we moving from focusing on the unit to focusing on the individual? Is that the new blueprint of marriage? Is that what marriages are built on and what they look like today? And if so, are you okay with that? You know, what do you think? Has the fabric and purpose of marriage totally changed? Is that something that you think will sustain us as a people? You can call me at 412-213-8995 or text 412-218-3888. Another way that marriages are changing is due to something that's called the burden of the soulmate. Like I told you, I don't believe in a soulmate. I don't believe that there is just one person who completes you, that there's one person out there who is ideally matched for you. I think that no one person can fulfill everything. That's the burden of the soulmate. So, given that no one is going to fulfill everything, you have to decide what things are most important, what things can you live without, what compromises are you willing to make, and that's the person that you spend forever with until death do you part. And let's think about it. There are times when people may lose a spouse, they become widowed or become a widower, and they find someone else and they're just as happy with that someone else. So that kind of blows the myth of the soulmate. But anyway, the psychological weight of expecting one person, one human being to provide what used to require an entire community is where this burden of the soulmate comes in. One person can't be your best friend, your therapist, your life coach, your companion, all of those things. Excuse me. And so we have to ask one person to fill in all of these roles, you know, best friend, lover, co-parent, career coach, spiritual guide, all of the above. Is that sustainable? Can one person really do that throughout the entire marriage? Can one person be all of that? And should they be all of that? So it's like today, here's some roles we expect people to play. We're expecting our partner to be the passionate lover. Everybody wants to have that sexual chemistry. Everybody wants to have that person that just kind of, you know, makes you melt when you see them, that you just can't wait to be alone and have sexual intimacy with them and all of those things. And again, there's nothing wrong with any of these things that I'm outlining. It's just a matter of, do they always come, all of them packaged into one individual? So sexual chemistry is a great thing. It's not the only thing that's important in a relationship, but it is a good thing to have. You want your spouse or your life partner to be that passionate lover, the best friend. That's all about emotional intimacy. Do you tell all your deep, dark secrets to your spouse? Is that the person that you rely on the most when you are feeling some kind of way? You know, if you're anxious, if you're depressed, if you're lonely, if you're sad, if your self-esteem is low, if you're feeling incompetent, whatever is going on, when you're happy and joyful, is that individual the one that you think about first? As soon as something happens, whether it's good or bad, are they the one that you want to pick up the phone and call right away? That might be the best friend. And so now we want them to be the passionate lover and the best friend. You want them to be the co-parent. And that's more of, do we have synergy around the logistics of this thing? So what does co-parenting look like and how do we make it work? Who carries out what responsibilities? What jobs are yours versus what jobs are mine? Do I get them breakfast? Excuse me. Do I take them to school? Am I the one that does bath time and bedtime? What exactly does co-parenting look like? And then there's the career coach. Do you want that person to have the same kind of professional ambition that you have? Do you want them to be someone who can lead you and guide you in your career? Do you want them to follow you as you climb the ladder, even if that means moving from city to city, state to state, country to country? Now with global organizations, a career move might not just be leaving one US city and going to another one. It might mean doing a stretch overseas. And so, what role are you asking your soulmate to play? And then, what about the spiritual anchor? Are you equally yoked from a spiritual perspective? It's probably going to be another show at some point, or at least a segment of it, is talking about when people come from different spiritual points of view. So, are you expecting them to have the same spiritual values that you have? Are you expecting them to believe what you believe? And adding that to the passionate lover, the best friend, the co-parent, the career coach, and on and on and on. So the burden is when one aspect fails, we tend to view the entire marriage as a failure. Many people in today's blueprint see one thing that doesn't measure up and they're ready to throw in the towel, rather than just realizing that that's a single area that might need some work. Maybe if we communicate better, maybe if we read some self-help books, maybe if we go to couples counseling, maybe if we take a marriage seminar, whatever the case might be. But the old expression, if you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, that's kind of what this is. Okay, so you've put this great weight on this individual to be your all in all. And when they don't measure up in any one particular area, you're deciding that they're not your soulmate and you need to cut the ties. We often want a partner who is so predictable. There's there's safety and reliability in that. We want you to be so predictable, but at the same time, we want you to be adventurous. We create this dichotomy. People who are very predictable, don't usually tend to be the ones who are mysterious and adventurous and exciting. So again, we're putting that burden on them. It's psychologically exhausting to be someone's safe place and also try to be their wild adventure. You can't do both at the same time. So we really need to think about, in this new blueprint, the way that the trends are going, the way relationships are going. Do we have realistic expectations of people? And are we taking the focus off of the unit and placing the focus on to the individual? It's not about me, or it's still about the family. Those are some of the questions you need to ask. So particularly if you're not married, if you're someone who's looking to be married, these are things that you need to be thinking about. Am I expecting too much? Is my potential partner expecting too much? And what's the middle ground? Where are we going to find the synergy? Where's the compromise? Where are we going to land as we try to figure this thing out? And then if you are married, of course, hopefully, depending on how long you've been married, you may have progressed through some of these things already. These still may not be talking points for you, but people change. And as we are exposed to new thoughts, new ideas, new movies, new books, new TV shows, new friends, new coworkers, something that was solid can eventually be chipped away at, and people will come up with a different perspective. So these are just some of the things that we need to be thinking about. And previously, these things they didn't come into play in a the blueprint, the landscape, it's all changing. So we're coming up on time for another break. And I want you to think about, what are your expectations? Are you setting your partner up to fail? To avoid that, some couples are coming up with relationship contracts. Now, I'm not talking about prenups. Like I said, I'm talking about a social contract. I'm talking about an agreement that looks at how each partner is going to behave. It's almost like a job description. It feels clinical to me, but it seems to be working for some people. And it's more in newer generations that are putting together these relationship contracts. So as we break, I want you to think about what a relationship contract really means for a marriage. You know, is it something that you're willing to do while you date? Or is it something that you're willing to do in marriage? Or is it something that you think has no place in love and romance at all? So when we come back, right now, to relationships, I'm Dr. Linda Green, and I'd love to continue this conversation with you as soon as we come back.
Looking for a cost-effective way to help increase your company's bottom line? Look no further than Soul Pit Media. With our award-winning print, internet, podcast, and Soul Pit television options, we can help your business get to that next level. For more information, contact Craig Dawson at 412-407-7685. That's 412-407-7685. And let Soul Pit Media take you to that next level.
Business owners thinking about back-to-school promotions and replacing summer flavors with pumpkin? What about your taxes? Reduce your stress and tax liabilities by planning for tax time now with Cameron Professional Services Group. CPSG takes your goals, values, and visions to create a custom tax plan catered specifically to your business. We work closely with you to ensure that as your business grows and goals shift, so will your custom plan. Located in the Hill District in Pittsburgh, PA, CPSG is a CPA and consultant firm, providing services in accounting, auditing, tax planning and preparation, community development, and operational management. Call Cameron Professional Services Group today at 412-251-0607.
Have you had the Beat by Niche experience? Beat by Niche is one of the top makeup artists in the city of Pittsburgh. She's touched the face of Cardi B, Love and Hip Hop personalities, and various Steeler wives. If you have not sat in her chair, what are you waiting for? Visit beatbyniche.com to schedule your special makeover for all occasions, weddings, graduations, proms, photo ops, and more. Visit beatbyniche.com and experience the touch of excellence.
I'm staying. Baby, I'm staying. You know why? I've got staying power. Lady, I've made plans in a fancy restaurant where we can dance. Put on my favorite dress.
Welcome back. Welcome back. You are listening to Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing. And if you're just joining us, man, you missed a lot. In the first hour, we talked about commuter marriages and all the things that go along with that. And now we're talking about roles in a relationship. And roles don't just mean household chores and finances. It goes so much deeper. I shared with you some of the roles that people are kicking around, like being my lover, my best friend, my coach, my career partner, my therapist, and on and on and on. And so to make things work, many couples are coming up with relationship contracts, and that's where we're going now in the conversation. One of the things you can always count on when you're listening to Pittsburgh's DSCN is we're going to bring you, no matter what show you listen to, you're going to get topics that are current and relevant to your life. So for example, there was someone in the studio before my show started who was talking about the fact that she loves the show. The topics are always right on point. It's something that she can relate to. And that's always our goal, is to bring you good, relevant information that you can use. So I want to talk to you about relationship contracts. It may not be something that fits your relationship. I know it doesn't personally fit mine. It may not fit yours either, but we need to know what's going on out there, particularly for those who are not currently married, but maybe looking to be married. Even though a lot of what we've talked about today has focused on marriages, there are people who are maybe on that cusp, trying to decide, do I jump into this or not? And we need to give them some good information. So relationship contracts. By clearly defining the roles in your relationship, you create a framework for managing expectations. And that can prevent misunderstandings. It can reduce tension. It can help prevent resentment. And that's why some people do them, because this clarity helps each partner in the relationship feel respected and valued for their contributions. It makes sure that each party is able to contribute and that the contributions are based on your skills and abilities, your likes and dislikes, and that there's some balance, that no one feels like they are doing more and carrying the relationship. So, as I said, it tends to be in younger generations now, starting out while they're still dating. They are in many ways creating these dating relationship contracts, but then they carry over into marriage, and they want to make sure that there are clear roles. Clear roles will allow for better communication, I'll give you that. And with specific expectations in place, partners are able to share their thoughts and feelings more openly because they know the rules. That I don't know where that's coming from in the newer generations. Maybe you have some thoughts or insights around that you're willing to share, but people are starting to feel safer when they know what are the rules. Tell me the boundaries that I have to play within. It creates a safer environment for them to express their needs and solve their problems. So you know the numbers, 412-213-8995 or 412-218-3888. All right. By explicitly defining roles, couples aim to prevent the unspoken resentment that grows when partners assume that the other just knows what to do. Many times it is that misunderstanding. I would talk to couples who feel like, well, he should have known, or she knows me well enough to know. And so one of the things that relationship contracts do is eliminate a lot of that gray area. It eliminates the belief that you need to know me well enough or you should have known. And it makes it explicit exactly what is expected of the other. Without clear description, one partner often shoulders a disproportionate share of the mental work. I mean, not even just the physical work, the chores or the finances, but things like social planning. Who plans the get-togethers with friends? Who plans the date nights? Who's the one that initiates fun? Who remembers the birthdays and the anniversaries? Is there one person that sort of keeps the calendar, reminding people, that there's a child's birthday or a grandchild's birthday coming up? Who's responsible for that? Sometimes it works well. One person knows that that's their role. They've got the better memory and they don't mind doing it. But it doesn't always work like that. That person might feel some resentment around the fact that you are not carrying the weight. You are not doing what I need you to do. So who does most of those things in your relationship? Think about it. How do you feel about that? Or things may be disproportionate when it comes to household chores. Are chores evenly distributed in the home? There was a time when most of the cooking and cleaning fell on the woman. Well, one of the reasons why it fell on the woman is because she was at home while he was out earning a living. But it's not like that anymore. That's old school traditional roles. Now you tend to have a dual income family. So if we're both out of the home all day earning the money, then we should both be carrying the weight. Take home. Maybe we share the cleaning, maybe we share the cooking, maybe you do a schedule, however it works for you. There's no one way that's better than another. It's one works best for you. But you have to make sure that those roles are clear. It doesn't always require it to be written like a relationship contract, but you do want to make sure that everybody understand the parameters and they feel good about them. So what do you think about relationship contracts? Would a relationship contract work for you in your relationship? Would you feel safer and more secure if you had those boundaries in place? Or are you more of a free flowing, free spirited kind of person? Whoever sees it gets it done. Things will all fall into place and take care of themselves. The solution to some of this is putting it in writing, because then there's something we can go back to. It creates some mutual accountability. It ensures that both partners feel respected and valued. And like I said, nobody feels as if they're carrying too much of the weight. Something else that couples do with respect to these contracts, they may not necessarily be writing it down, but they hold these family meetings. Some people call them like state of the union, state of the family union meetings. And maybe it happens every Sunday night, or maybe it happens on Saturday morning or Friday night, whenever it happens to be. But it's a time when the family comes together to discuss things like the household responsibilities, the finances, the emotional satisfaction, the psychological safety. It's like a check-in. Is everybody okay? Are we flowing as a family? Or do we need to tweak some things? And again, some people feel like that's pretty clinical. If something comes up, we talk about it, but why do we need to sit down every week and have this conversation? And then there are other people who feel like, well, if we do it every week, then things won't just come up out of nowhere. Everything will be in check. But you have to think about, does the over planning kind of kill spontaneity? Does it kill romance? Or is this clarity the new chemistry? I guess it depends on your personality type. If people share the same feeling about it, then there's no discord. But what happens when one is comfortable with having these State of the Union meetings and the rest of the family is not? So think about, what is one unspoken rule in your relationship, something that maybe you wish was actually written down. Maybe there's something that keeps happening almost spontaneously, and maybe it feels out of balance. Maybe you would feel better if there were some parameters around it to help guide it. It's just one of those things that we don't always think about until there's a problem. So is it better to put things in place before there's a problem? I don't know. But relationship contracts seem to be part of the new blueprint of marriage and relationships. And so there's one other one that I want to make sure we get in before we end for the evening. And that is this concept of sleep divorce. Now, I have to admit, that's a fairly new term for me. I don't know if you've heard about it before, but as I was digging into information to get ready for tonight, I came across this concept of sleep divorce. So sleep divorce is the rising trend of master bedrooms becoming separate bedrooms for the sake of mental health and sleep hygiene. There's some people that say it saves their marriage. So, for example, let's say that a woman is in perimenopause or menopause, and she needs to have the room chilly, and he likes to have the room warm. Rather than get into discord or one person being uncomfortable for the sake of the other person, some couples may choose to sleep in separate rooms so that they can keep the temperature controlled where they want it to be. Or maybe due to her perimenopause or menopause, she's suffering from insomnia. And throughout the night, she might need to get up, move around. She might want to turn the light on and read. She might cut on the television, do different things to take up time and to help her feel sleepy so that she can lay down and get some rest. Well, quite naturally, by doing those things, she's likely to be disturbing her partner. And so rather than doing things that are going to interfere with the partner's sleep, maybe it's better to sleep in separate bedrooms. Sometimes it happens because they work different schedules, different hours. And you may have people who one works days, the other works nights. Better to have separate bedrooms so that everybody can get the rest that they need. So these are just some of the reasons why people sleep in separate bedrooms. It's not because there's anything wrong with the marriage. There's no argument. Nobody's got a beef with the other person. It's just a matter of, I need to get my rest and I don't want to disturb you or keep you from getting your rest. So those are the things to do. About 1/3 of Americans actually it's 35%, say that they occasionally or consistently sleep in separate rooms, and it's to improve the sleep quality. It's a trend that we're calling sleep divorce. And so there have been studies here from 1 in 5 couples consistently sleep in separate bedrooms. With younger generations like millennials, it's about 43% of millennials say that they sleep in separate bedrooms. About 33% of Gen X say they sleep in separate bedrooms. And the practice is becoming more and more popular. Baby boomers, it's 22%. So again, you can see that old school folks, which would be the baby boomers, it's happening less than it is with like millennials. Baby boomers is 22%, millennials is almost double at 43%. It's just a new way that people are trying to figure out, how do we get along? And as I said, in some cases, it might depend on your job, your career, your hours of employment. And so it makes some sense that as we are becoming more progressive with respect to how we work and who works, you could understand how the need for it might creep up a little bit. So, it's like I remember the days when watching television, some of the old school shows like Dick Van Dyke Show or I Love Lucy, you would see them in the same room, but sleeping in separate beds. And of course, it was for different reasons, the censorship and so forth on television, but you would see that. But now, we're talking about taking it to a totally different level where couples are not sleeping in separate beds, but in separate rooms. Maybe somebody snores and it gets in the way. Maybe somebody has to get up to use the restroom repeatedly throughout the night. There are all kinds of reasons that people have nowadays for sleeping in separate rooms. So when couples stop sleeping together, it doesn't always, but it can lead to some emotional distance between them. There's not that same connection, and it can decrease the physical intimacy. There's nothing like rolling over and, your leg touches his leg, or his arm he throws over your back, or spooning, or that nothing can replace that. If the other person is down the hall, then that spontaneous physical intimacy is going to decrease because you're not going to roll over and find somebody on the other side of the bed. So those connections can be weakened, and it could potentially weaken the bond of the relationship. If somebody has a need in the middle of the night, I guess maybe you just get up and walk down the hall. I mean, I don't know, but those are some of the things that are popping up. So I don't know. If you're sleeping in separate bedrooms and it's working for you, let us know. 412-213-8995 or text 412-218-3888. All right, so as we get ready to wrap, let's think about, what does a successful marriage look like? We talked about commuting. We talked about all or nothing marriages. We talked about relationship contracts and sleeping in separate rooms, or sleep divorce, as they call it. We've talked about a number of different things. What does a successful marriage look like? It's an interesting question, and there's no one answer. It can look like different things for different people. When you look throughout history, the fundamental purpose of marriage has shifted. It's shifted from helping spouses meet their basic economic and political needs to helping them meet their intimacy and passion needs. And then it's even moving into helping them meet their autonomy and personal growth needs. So let's see, check in. I think I've got a text from someone. Yes, Cameron from Ohio. How can a military marriage survive when your spouse is always deployed? It wasn't like that when we first met. It's a great question. It is, I'm sure, extremely difficult. And so this is one of those situations, Carmen, I'm sorry if I didn't say that right the first time. Carmen, this is one of those situations where it might be necessary to put some of these things in place that we're talking about. Not necessarily relationship contracts, though maybe, and it doesn't have to be written, but at least the conversation needs to take place. You need to talk about it like a commuter marriage, because in essence, that's what you are. I think a military spouse has to be super strong, because you already know that you're going to be carrying the load by yourself the majority of the time. So you've got to be super strong. But once you've made that commitment to this person and to the marriage, now you need to figure out, what can we do to keep as much contact as possible. Depending on where your spouse is deployed and whether or not they're in active duty or just working from a base that is not near home, you might still be able to do some of those things like texting occasionally throughout the day, FaceTiming throughout the day. It really depends on the deployment. Of course, there's the old-fashioned things of, writing letters, cards, sending packages, but you have to work hard and use technology as much as possible to be able to make sure that the connection stays intact. And because you can't always predict when you'll get to see that person, they don't always know when they're going to get leave. When leave comes up, you need to plan it out so that, as I was saying earlier, that there's couple time. And if there are children, you need to plan for just parents to have time together, for the whole family to have time together, and for your spouse to be able to spend time alone with the children, preferably one-on-one. You need to have a schedule and try to stick to it. It does become very routine, somewhat clinical, but someone who's used to the military will be used to that regimentation of here's what we do and when we do it and how we do it. It's going to be harder on you, the spouse, because you have to kick in and become regimented with that. It's hard on the spouse because you're left behind to take care of the household and the children. So yes, it's a difficult thing. And maybe it wasn't like that when you first met, but as the situation is evolving, you have to evolve. You need to have good communication. Talk about what is going on and how it's making you feel. And both of you need to be involved in brainstorming how to get past it. It's not your job alone to figure out how to handle it. It's something that you have to talk about together. And you need to express how it makes you feel and be honest and open about that and try to come up with a plan. There's no easy answer for that. One of the things you can do is talk to other military spouses, find out what are they doing and how do they make it work. There's some people who make a career out of being in the military. So their spouse has had to deal with a lot of these things for a long period of time. Find some older, wiser, more seasoned spouses and not only learn from what they do, but maybe get together with them because they understand what you're going through. So you might need to make some friendships, build some relationships, find a support network inside other spouses, especially if you're living on or near a base. But even if you're not, you can find other people. It may have to be a virtual relationship. Maybe you do a Zoom call. I'm sure there are support groups out there. And if you can't find one, then you might have to establish one for yourself. Come up with something and see what you can do to make that marriage work. All right, just a few minutes left. Got a text message from a friend that's saying, yay, military marriage. Here's, that same friend might want to chime in and give us some advice on how to make that work. But as we wrap up, let me just talk about some things that you do for success, okay? So the positive consequences that those marriages that succeed in meeting those needs are particularly fulfilling. I think it's even more fulfilling because you know all the struggle you had to go through to make it work. So it's more fulfilling. And sometimes those are the best marriages, people say. So in a commuter marriage situation, the argument is that if success is defined as supporting each other's self-actualization or growth, then a commuter marriage is a triumph of autonomy. The nuance, it is a success. The distance is a strategic choice to protect individual identities, but it could be a failure if it becomes a permanent avoidance tactic. So again, if you are running from something, which is why you choose to live in a separate city, or perhaps why you want to be deployed someplace else, maybe you had a choice and you chose that assignment. If you're using it as a strategy to avoid something or to escape intimacy, then of course that's not going to be a successful marital situation. So you have to decide, is it better to have 48 hours of high quality focused time together every single week when the commuter comes back home? Or would you rather have 168 hours of distracted, resentful coexistence? Now, I realize there are things in between. There's some gray area. It's not just either or, But that's something to think about. Maybe those 48 hours, that weekend when he or she returns home, could be the best darn weekend. Those are two great days that you can maybe just spend time together, especially if there are no young kids in the house. That's all time for us. And so the other time, those 168 hours throughout the week, maybe hit or miss. So that's something to think about. And then when we think about, do contracts and sleep divorces help? Sleep divorces, by prioritizing physical health and mood regulation, couples are actually protecting their emotional bond. They're protecting it from the friction of sleep deprivation. People aren't getting enough sleep. Not only are they going to be, it's going to have an impact on them physically as well as emotionally. They may not be themselves. They may be irritable and have mood swings. So if you know that you can be your best self by sleeping down the hall and your partner is okay with that, then that might be the thing to do, as long as it works for the two of you. Part of the problem that we have is that people often, they share what's going on in their household. And whenever you share, the people that you share with are going to have an opinion. Because it doesn't work for them doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it if it works for you and your spouse. And then when you think about those relationship contracts, they get rid of mind reading. They take the pressure off of the other person to just automatically know what it is that you want. And they put more emphasis on communicating. So success in the modern era requires explicit, radical honesty. And if a contract prevents 10 years of silent simmering over chores, then it's a massive success. If it takes a contract for you to work out how you're going to deal with one another and interact, then by all means, do what works for you. So a relationship contract isn't going to solve all your problems. There's not always going to be a perfect middle ground for every topic on your list. And you'll probably find some areas where it's more uncomfortable to talk about than others, like sex and finances, for example. But the beauty of a relationship contract could be that it provides a safe space for you to voice hard to discuss wants or fears. And you don't have to discuss them when they come up. You got a plan in advance. Those are just some of the things that we can do. And of course, there are more in terms of how you prioritize communication and be supportive and selfless, and how you handle conflicts, all of that. But because we were so focused tonight on commuter marriages and some of the new trends that are happening, I wanted to make sure that I gave you some things that you could do. I think it's important to never stop communicating. Have to keep communicating. Never stop being honest. Never stop dating one another. Never stop the intimacy. And that means both the emotional closeness, physical, non-sexual closeness, and the sexual closeness. All of that is important until you and unless you make the relationship a priority. You're not going to have a successful marriage. So there are a number of things that we have to address. I got one more text that we'll talk about. John from DC. Is it healthy for a marriage to have lady or man trips? Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, it depends on the individuals, and you have to have a trusting relationship. But one caveat I would put in that is if there's going to be a girls' trip, then if that girl is married, then the majority, if not all, of the women in that group need to be married. You don't need to be a married person, the only married person hanging out with single women, or the only married man hanging out with single men, because your objectives, your values, your activities, your wants and desires may be different, and you don't want to be pulled in the wrong direction. But I see nothing wrong with taking, girls' trips, boys' trips, that kind of thing. I think it's healthy for the couple to take trips together. If you have children, it's healthy to then take vacations with the children. And it's healthy to have some getaways by yourself. But the only time that could potentially be a problem is when there is not enough trust in the relationship. So you want to work on the trust first and have a good solid foundation before you start taking those kinds of trips. Make sure your spouse, your partner is cool with it and they understand. And so it may take a while, but trust is the foundation of everything. So my time is up. I absolutely enjoy the time that we spend today, every Monday night. And so as we close out today, I want to leave you with this. We used to think a successful marriage was a rock, unmoving, heavy, and permanent. But maybe the modern successful marriage is more like a river. It changes shape, it bends, it goes through dry spells and floods, but it keeps moving forward. Whether you're sleeping in separate rooms, living in separate cities, or signing a contract every Sunday morning, if you are both becoming better versions of yourselves because of that partnership, you aren't doing it wrong. You're finally doing it for yourselves. So keep it to yourself. You don't necessarily have to tell everyone what's going on. Just make sure that you do what works for you. All right, that does it for me. I want to remind you that you can sail the Caribbean, 7-day Caribbean cruise in November, along with the DSCN family. Pittsburgh's DSCN doing a 7-day Caribbean cruise coming up. Details are all on the website. Also, you need to be reminded that tomorrow you can tune in to hear Kevin Cameron, James Taylor, and Ken Craig bring you Soul Tape, which is Pittsburgh's live sports talk show. It will air tomorrow, Tuesday, from 6 to 8 p.m. And stay tuned, because right after me, you're going to listen to the best of soulful music. It's on from 10 until midnight, so please stay tuned for that. Till next time, family, keep learning, keep growing, keep loving. One love.
You've been listening to Relationship Conversations with Dr. Linda Bing. Continue to listen to Pittsburgh's DSEN. We're on 24/7. See our radio schedule for programming details, and please remember to subscribe to receive updated information.